Welcome to Stories on Stage Online Edition. I'm Monique Mulligan, and today I'm chatting with Leah Swann about her book Sheerwater, right here. Sheerwater was published by HarperCollins, and it's an incredible book, a powerful and emotional story about a mother's love. Some describe it as beautiful, some describe it as brutal, and they're words that don't often go together so well, but in this case they work. Leah is an award-winning fiction author, journalist and speechwriter, and I'm really happy to speak to you today, Leah.
It's great to be here, Monique.
Thank you for joining me. Today I really would love to dive deep into Sheerwater. This book, you've had some terrific feedback about it. How's it been for you launching this book?
Well, it's been really lovely, actually. I was the first week that the week that it was published was the week that we went into lockdown. So
Yeah.
I was really unsure how it would go because all the bookshops were closed and all that, the hope that, booksellers would like it and sell it, of course, all of that didn't happen. But then what has happened there's been online events like this one, and people have started talking about the book, and I've had some lovely feedback from people just saying that they couldn't put it down and that they fell in love with the characters. And so as a writer yourself, you would know that this is just music to your ears when people really engage deeply with a story that you've poured so much love and care into.
Let's have a bit of a talk about it. To me, like, Sheerwater discusses or it dives into what people do in the name of love and protection. And there's some really strong themes of migration and flying through this book. People are flying or fleeing from different experiences, from different people. They're even fleeing from themselves. That's how I read it, and I loved those themes. Can you tell readers who haven't read this a little bit more about the story so they get that sort of idea?
Yeah, I actually love the way you've drawn that together, Monique. So the story begins with a woman, Ava. She's driving. She's on her way to a town called Sheerwater on the Great Ocean Road in Victoria on the southeast coast. It's a very beautiful, dramatic coast. And they're almost there, her and her two boys, Max and Teddy, when they witness a light plane crash on the side of the road, and it's the last thing she wants to do, but she feels compelled to help, and so she pulls over and she does help. But when she gets back to the car, the boys have gone missing, and so the rest of the story is really about what happens to them. But you're quite right, we don't know exactly what's going on with Ava and Max and Teddy at that point, but we know that they're starting a new life and that they're leaving something behind, and we do learn what they are leaving. But there are, as you say, some other layers to that theme of flight. So the book has the migration of the Sheerwaters returning to that area. And it also features a character called Simon, who's also fleeing a difficult situation. He is. You learn about Simon. You meet Simon for the first time at the accident. He pulls over to help as well, and he becomes a kind of. Although he's not a major character, he becomes a support to Ava during what is really a horrendous time for her. It is, as anyone who's ever had any care of children knows, your worst nightmare when children go missing.
Oh, so. It would be. And the way you built that up, the flight, the plane crashing just gives this incredible sense of foreboding for the story, because you just know things are not going to go well here. But it wasn't just, the fact of it's bad enough that this plane crashes and then she comes back after helping these it's a horrible, traumatic situation for everyone who's involved in it. And then she comes back and her little boys are gone. And I found that first chapter, it was just incredible. It was so suspenseful. And I remember putting it down and thinking, wow, I want to write like that. So, yeah, it's
Thanks,
true.
Monique.
Yeah,
That's
it's
lovely.
true.
It didn't start out like that. Although that first scene was certainly it actually came into my mind pretty much as you read it on the page. But of course, you have to go through a few drafts to get it to be taught and to really have that sense of suspense. But I think, when you have something that you care about, like children, that immediately just ramps it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. How hard was that when you say that you went back to these drafts, and so you've got to do, I suppose, that layering and that tightening and really get that pace? Because I found that first chapter really, really pacey. So much happened, but I sort of tore through it and just went, oh, I need to know what happens next, and so then suddenly you have the staying up late all night to read a book situation, which is exactly what you want. Yeah, not so much when I've got to get up the next day.
Yeah, you're not alone in that experience. Look, one of the things I love really as a reader is I just love it when you pick up a book and you just get lost in the world of the book and everything else has to be put on hold. You might quickly make a fried egg for dinner and then you race back to your couch so you can keep reading. And it's an experience I have less and less of these days. But whenever I find it, I really love it. But the other thing I really love is literary fiction. So I just, and I love exploring the emotional lives between the characters. And so I thought, well, if I build a bit of suspense around it, that will give me a bit of a, not a smoke screen, that's not the right term, but it'll give me a bit of time for me to then just go into those relationships in the way that I really want to explore them. Because one of the challenges as a writer is you have your interests, but they're not necessarily what the reader wants to read about. The reader wants to be lost in the story, whereas you might be really interested in this minor character and follow them for 30 pages. But and that you can do that if you want to, but when it comes to redrafting it for a reader, you kind of have to, you probably have to make that cool assessment and say, this is maybe not that interesting, which is always a bit hard to do.
It is really hard to do that. And I suppose, I was thinking about that suspense factor, and I feel if this was purely a literary book, you'd have that space to really dive into those emotional relationships that you wanted to, but you might not have had the same kind of readers or same sort of breadth of readers that maybe Sheerwater's attracting now, because that suspense factor, it really, right from the start makes it relatable to people, anyone who's had a child or been running from something and then come across that roadblock of some sort. That's incredibly relatable for people. So, I think it was a really good move to do it.
It was definitely, and then telling it from the four perspectives was actually a little bit challenging, because I then had to make sure that, because they're all telling the same story, that I wasn't repeating too much information. There is a little bit of overlap between stories, so that involved, really a lot of cutting and sort of saying, okay, I'll leave this perspective at this point, and then start Max's perspective, the little boy's perspective from here. So that and this back and forward thing really meant a lot of work, but I think it was very satisfying in the end, because
It would be.
the aim was to make it feel seamless to the reader. So that, when you a little bit like a carpenter sort of polishing it so that you can't see any of the divots or nail heads or anything, so that but all of that work's gone on. It's just that you can't see. It looks like you've just sat down one day and written it all like that.
Yeah, and this how long did it take you to write?
From start to finish, about 4 years.
Yeah. That's how long it took for mine. But then in between, I wrote something else. So it's not like it was 4 years of constant work. But when you sort of weigh up yeah, the hours and the time that you spend and how different it is from the start. You know, it's yeah, such a huge process.
It is a huge process. And I
Yeah.
think as well, it is kind of good to be doing other things because it gives you a bit of perspective. So, you know, if you're writing something else or you have a have a job or whatever, you have to take time away from the draft and give
Yes.
yourself a break
Yeah.
from and then you can come back with clear eyes, you know, and go, gee, that's better than I thought, or that's worse than I thought, you know,
Yeah.
and you get that bit of distance.
Yes. I think Stephen King talks about that, doesn't he, in his memoir, in the On Writing one,
Does.
where he sort of says, you know, you've written your draft and then you go away. And I tell writers that too when they ask, you know, what do I do? I've finished my draft. And sometimes they even say, I've finished my draft. Should I send it to a publisher now? And you say, oh, no.
No.
You know,
No,
you want to go like,
not
no,
yet.
no. But
Yeah,
you
yeah,
you know, you really do need to sit back and give yourself the fresh eyes and I guess for you, like you say, incredibly satisfying to see this finished product here and know that people are responding to it in such, I suppose, emotional but, you know, even analytical ways where they want to know more about it. Yeah.
yes.
When you talked about ambiguity at the heart of relationships, can you tell us, and how you explored that in here, can you tell us a little bit about that and how it relates to Sheerwater?
Yeah, sure. So I think what ambiguity is that space that you can enter in a relationship where you're not exactly. I think we make assumptions sometimes that we're on very stable ground with someone, and we think we know them, and then something happens that reveals their behavior in a new way, or you become aware of a pattern of relating it. And these are the things that we talk about, you know, amongst our friends. Gee, you know, he or she said this, and then
Yeah.
I realized this, and we have these conversations, and you realize that we are on shifting ground, and you can't, you know, we probably project a lot more of ourselves into the relationship than is really there, because every person is unique. You know, there's that amazing Jewish saying, you know, that every person is a universe. And I'm fascinated by that concept, and I'm fascinated by how those universes overlap, and that overlapping, that's the area that I'm most interested in.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's they can't help but be ambiguous. But then there's a kind of continuum of that where, you know, somebody might be strange or surprising to you, but they're basically a trustworthy person. And then there are levels of untrustworthiness, and that is something that Sheerwater explores as well.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think there were different aspects of the novel that I felt I could personally relate to, and so at times it was just like, oh, how do you know? Like, you know, this is yes, I know,
Yeah,
I've seen this before, and I felt that you
yeah,
captured those aspects particularly well. And I was thinking, without giving too much away, but about one of the characters and the inability to see themselves and see,
yes,
and you know who I
yeah,
mean, and to see how they're presenting. But yeah, and I thought, oh, I know people like that. I've been close to people like that, and that's really difficult. And that made me relate to Ava so much more. You know, aside from the
yes,
fact that she had
yeah.
two little boys, similar age difference to mine. You know.
Oh no, I
No,
didn't
mine are
realize that,
older
Monique.
now.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, mine are older now, so it's okay. But I've yes, I understood aspects of that. So yeah,
Yeah. So so that particular character, as you say, is I think without I'm
yeah,
hesitant to use labels like narcissist and all of that sort of thing, but
yeah,
I think we do know people who all and if you've been a close observer of relationships, you can see that some people have a really controlling aspect to them, and they can, you know, some people are in situations in their personal relationships, either in a marriage or with a parent or sibling or something, where the other person is undermining them, and undermining them to the point where they actually doubt their own validity, their own judgment. And that's tragic when that starts to happen, because everyone has the right to their own security in their own emotional and mental health, I suppose, their own being. And it's actually quite a wicked thing to do to another person.
I found that there's another quote in here, and I've got it here marked. Let's see. And it's from Lawrence's mother, and it's not that page, it is here. She said, "We become evil when we hide the truth from ourselves." And that quote, I just thought that's just such a terrific quote. It's so loaded, isn't it? The way that she says it. And I was thinking about this because I found there were lots of observations like this throughout the book, where I just go, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Do you think that this kind of truth, do you think this is true of everyone? What she was saying there?
That we become evil when we hide the truth from ourselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I think it's a continuum. So I think, psychologically speaking, that the truth is something that it keeps us healthy in our relationships. Like if you've got the guts to sort of say, hey, I actually stuffed up there, or I actually lied to you last week, or I did this, and you have that really horrible, awkward conversation, and the other person's angry with you, but then you get to a better place. You get to a place of security and certainty, because the other person's trust, whether they're annoyed and angry with what's happened, their trust goes back up in you. And so that trust is the bedrock on which sturdy relationships are built. And so truth is essential to that. And I think that people who make a habit of being untruthful to others and then create a narrative around the stories they're telling to themselves start to go down a bit of a pathway where their psychological map, if you like, is no longer pointing. It's skewed. So and when you begin to feel that about another person, you can't really it's very difficult to relate to them authentically, because you're not really sure where they're coming from.
Yeah, that's really true. I think one of the things you just said then was, you were talking about the word bedrock, and that immediately made me think of the Great Ocean Road, which is your incredible setting. And I've been there myself many years ago, probably 2 or 3 times, and it's as you say, so dramatic and in different lights, offers so many different feelings and I suppose so much changing beauty. But I was thinking about the rock and the London Bridge, and that thought where you go and you stand there and you have to trust. But these people, and you speak about this scene where these people, early on, Ava's talking to Max about this bridge and how it just crumbled under them. And I was thinking how relationships are just like that, aren't they? And I don't know if you meant to bring that in deliberately as a kind of symbol, but I just suddenly got that when I was listening to you.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think of that specifically in relation to relationships per se. I mean, what's fascinating about that coast is that the sandstone is soft, so it's being eroded constantly by the water and being made into new shapes. There's something. Actually, my husband was just there on the weekend. He said there's something sort of a little bit tragic and unfinished about it. It's almost like it's always in this kind of movement. I think what's interesting about that story with London Bridge, that's a true story, that people went across that rock formation, and it started shaking. Maybe don't get on the bridge when it's shaking. But they thought it did that all the time.
Yeah.
But it really seizes Max's imagination.
It does.
This idea that the ground beneath your feet may not be locked in and I think what happens to him, he's plunged into a situation which is really a bit too big for him. He's
Yeah.
not able to, all of a sudden he has to make the decisions for himself and Teddy. He's very vulnerable. He's only, 9 years old. And everything that he's known and felt secure about is suddenly not like that anymore. And so there is a kind of correlation there, certainly.
I just saw it. I mean, I'm thinking about it more as you're talking, and I'm thinking so many of the characters have that experience, though, where the world
They
either
do.
has, as the story's being told, it's crumbling as they're experiencing the different events, or in the case of, was it Mary?
Yeah.
And her world, and the way that, there was the flight, and then there was the whole world just crumbling, things being taken from her. So life as you know it has just come out from under your feet. And I really love that imagery. And it's funny I didn't pick it up before, but it's just as we're talking that it's come to me that you've done it really well. Yeah. With I guess with the story and the emotional aspect of it. So you said once, I think, that you wanted to write this story a few years before the idea came to you earlier, and you weren't in a place to write it. So now when you came to the place to be able to write this, do you still get emotionally involved in that story when you're writing? Is that something you feel? Do you cry?
Yeah. So, I mean, the novel does touch on some emotional extremes. There's a tragic element to it. There's some very joyous elements to it. And I definitely, especially as I was writing the first draft, I let myself really feel those moments of joy and hope and sadness and tragedy. And in the book's darker moments, I cried when I was writing it. And there's later in the book, there's a lovely, friendly old couple. And to me, they were like, they kind of just turned up and I just wrote about them. But they were like, the little old couple in a fairy tale who helps you on your way. And I just really enjoyed being in their company because actually, I mean, their relationship was solid, and they were people who were totally trustworthy. And I enjoyed that because I felt that it was so needed in the book to have these characters. And there's another character, Caleb, who is like that, the brother of Simon, who, that these characters who are 100% trustworthy and wonderful, because they are a reminder of how we can find true security in people like that too.
Yeah, I felt that as well. I think that is something when you're writing, it's like you've got to have those moments of lightness in there, because if you don't give the reader a break, they might just go, I can't deal with this. So you've got to have that, and it can come in those ways. Yeah.
That's right. It is a bit of a roller coaster ride. I can see that. But I do think that there are places, way stations, where you can rest and
there are
and connect with those kinds of people.
yeah, I think so. And they're just that, like, okay. And do you listen to, when you're writing something like this, those emotional scenes, the ones where you've really got to, or the ones that are, say, digging into some of those darker sides of human nature? Do you listen to music, or do you have to have it completely quiet? Is there anything that kind of helps that situation for you?
Yeah. So when I'm writing, I prefer silence, because otherwise I tend to influence by the mood of whatever I'm listening to. But I do spend a lot of time, once I've drafted a scene, I'll go out for a walk and I'll be thinking about it, or even before, it might even be a scene that I'm about to write, and I'll listen to some particular kind of music, and it will, that mood or intensity is something that I'll touch it within myself, so that I can sort of feel that mood, and I can then reconnect with that and try and bring
Yeah.
it into the scene as I'm
Yeah.
writing. I actually put together a list of songs that I was listening to a lot.
I saw the
On a little
playlist. Yeah.
spotter. Yeah, and there
Yeah.
is one particular song in there which I listen to a lot.
Yes. I found the same. I had a playlist for my novel, and there's one song, and even now it comes on, I just go, that's Matt's song. You know, and you know,
Yes,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just it so much encompasses his feelings of despair at different times during the book, and so I can't think of it now as just a song. It specifically is his song. So
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
it's strange how that
yeah.
can
And music,
happen.
yeah. Well, music is very intangible, and what you're trying to do with writing is, I mean, although it does take form in a book, you're trying to bring something through, and then as the reader is reading it, they recreate that sense in themselves, and so it's a intangible, magical sort of a thing. So there is a
Yeah.
kind of something a little bit akin to music there.
There is, yeah. I'll give you one or two more questions. One of them was actually about the shearwaters and the birds themselves. And the piece that you started the book with, I wondered when it came to you to include that little, I suppose, that narrative. It's quite a lyrical piece about them flying and being at the end of their flight. And I was looking up shearwaters, and I thought about how so many of them had actually died. I think there was a case where many of them had entered their flight and then they just dropped dead, and people were trying to find out why. So I wondered at what point that became an element of the book, whether it was right at the start and always there, or something that you wove in later.
Yeah, it was definitely something I wove in later, because one of the things that I can't even remember what gave me the idea to look into it, but I had been discussing with somebody at work, actually a fellow writer, a journalist, the need for really what I would call atmospheric perspective. That you can. We were talking about another journalist's work, and he was saying, "Oh, the reason I find this difficult is we're so up close and personal. We're right there, but there's no context, there's no atmosphere around it." And I really reflected on it in relation to Sheerwater, which I was writing at the time, and I thought, yeah, there's a lot of intensity and suspense and pace. The book's told over 3 days, so readers are hurtling alongside those events with the characters. And I thought, oh, it's all a bit, it's all very fast and sort of an exciting and momentous and all of that. But I just wanted to sort of, if you like use the, just pull back and have that little bit of that kind of a difference in perspective. So there's 3 little very short passages about the shearwaters flying over the surface of the globe, really, and they have one of the longest migrations in the world, and it's they fly from Peterborough and Tasmania and those sort of places all the way up to the Bering Strait and back, and the form that the migration takes is kind of like a figure 8, which is a symbol for eternity, actually. And when I discovered that, I was so fascinated, and I thought, I wonder what they're doing. Is their activity somehow affecting life on the planet? As like all these rhythms that we are subject to but don't think about. Like the moon and the tides and all of that. And I loved that feeling of these beings just flying over the earth while we're down here sort of in the trenches,
Yeah.
having our intense relationships and adventures and so on.
Yeah.
So that was really why I introduced that.
And did that come to you by chance, or how sometimes the idea or that inspiration it's just there, you see an article or you see something, or did you go looking for it? How did that work?
I think I had this line in my head about something gliding over the surface of the globe, and what I already had the plane, not that I had deliberately thought about it in that way, but I thought, and oh, actually, yeah, that's right. There was a whole lot of backstory about why that plane crashed,
Mm.
and whole scene with the pilot looking at these golden eagles and how knowing he couldn't slow down the plane because
Yeah.
one of the reasons was that the plane crashed because of bird strike.
Mm.
And I thought, birds, yeah, birds. And so I started looking up seabirds. I think that's
Mm.
how it happened. And
Yeah.
then I started looking into shearwaters. Like the place was already called Sheerwater.
Oh, isn't that
And of
interesting?
course yeah, and
Mm.
it's spelt differently as well.
Mm.
It's spelt sheer, um, but I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And then I just got intrigued by this figure eight that they do and this idea of
Mm.
eternity. And, it all just seemed too good to be true, really. So I put it in.
A bit of serendipity there, I think. It sounds like.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the fun, isn't it, Monique,
Yeah.
of writing? You make these discoveries and you go, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's a
Mm.
nice
Mm.
touch.
Yes.
And you put it in, and it's
Yeah.
really interesting. And sometimes, as you know as well, sometimes it doesn't work, and you've got to cut it out again.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole scene with the eagles and the
Yes.
pilot.
Yeah.
That all went. Yeah.
No, and that's true. I've had that experience as well, where I've chosen a particular name or something, and then afterwards looked up the meaning or looked up something, or the say the European variant. I think it was a Czechoslovakian variant of this name, and I thought, oh, it actually means this, which is one of the key features in my book, and I didn't know this, and it was just a lovely little moment.
Isn't it
Yeah,
amazing? And how do you
yeah,
know that? There is something magical about that.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love that.
little things. Yeah, they're little stories that I think that writers get, where you just go, yes, that
Yes.
happened to me
Yeah, yeah.
too. So,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I'm going to end our chat there. It's been wonderful chatting with you today, and I could ask you many more questions. I wanted to talk a bit about some of the lessons you've learnt about writing, but I think we'll save that for another conversation, perhaps. But
That would be
thank you so
great.
much. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today and for your time, and just telling us a bit more about this beautiful book.
Oh, thanks,
Yes.
Monique. It's been wonderful to be here, and yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Thank you for tuning into Stories on Stage Online Edition. If you like a story that's suspenseful, I can't talk again now, suspenseful, emotional and unforgettable, pick up Sheerwater and read this book. It's available in print from bookstores and also online from places like Booktopia. Next week, I'll be chatting with Andrew Daddo about his latest children's book, Atticus Fantasticus 2, and it's bound to be a lot of fun. Hope to see you there. Bye.